Tonight, as rain braided silver lines across my window, a name started ringing my phone. Alex, the man everyone warned me about. My heart hammered like a stubborn door. Outside, tires hissed. Someone watched the house. I answered. His voice shook. Dave, he whispered, I think they found us. I'm here. I didn't know then how to measure fear. By inches of rain stacked in the gutters, or by the miles a person would drive to keep another safe. That night, as the storm pounded Riverbend, Ohio, fear left marks in small ways. The kitchen clock ticked a nervous beat. The porch light blinked hard through water. My old dog, Annabelle, lifted her head from her bed and looked at me, and her eyes asked a question I didn't know how to answer. Come in, I said into the phone, though I knew he wasn't at my door. Where are you? A pause. Thunder, like something heavy being moved in the sky. Not far, Alex said. Dave, if you don't want to be part of this, tell me now. I'll keep driving. You called me, I said plainly, because I knew the truth of it. Which means you don't want to drive alone. Another pause, softer. You always did listen, he said. I'm a mile away. You might see a car on your street. Don't open the door until you hear me knock twice, then once. I laughed, because it was such a simple thing, a code like we were kids. 2, then 1, I said. I'll make coffee. I hung up and moved on, automatic. Mug, filter, coffee. I set out 2 cups and then, feeling ridiculous, set out a 3rd, just in case fear needed a place to sit down and mind itself. The kettle sang. The house breathed. I had time, standing there, to wonder how I had gotten from the quiet, steady road I'd once walked, a regular job, regular days, to this, making coffee for the man the local paper liked to call the bad millionaire. It wasn't a term I ever used for him when we were alone, but it was out there. It stuck, the way a nickname sticks to a town whether it wants it or not. Bad, they'd said, when he bought the old Dixon mill for a song and the rumor grew that he'd gut it for parts. Bad when he didn't smile on cue or sign a check in public. Bad because he was rich in a place where money made people suspicious, and because he had that look, tailored suits and a scar on his cheekbone that made his handsome face almost too interesting. What I knew, what I'd learned the slow way, was that a person can own every light in the tallest building in Cincinnati and still sit in your kitchen and ask if the coffee is too strong. Too weak, if you need a sweater because the rain makes the room cold. 2 knocks. Then 1. I opened the door. Alex stood on my porch, soaked through. The porch light drew a halo around him, the way old movies make everything look like memory. He had his overnight bag slung over his shoulder, and that careful, clipped calm on his face that always told me he was 5 steps deeper into trouble than he'd say. He wasn't alone. A man in a dark raincoat stood beneath the maple tree across the street, pretending to check his phone. Come in, I said again, too loud past the rain. Alex sidestepped into the house, and I closed the door. He leaned his forehead against the wood for a second, like he'd arrived home from the kind of day you wash off only by standing still. I don't know when I first started calling this house home. Maybe the first winter after my father died, when I kept the heat a little too high, because he used to say cold knotted his knees. Maybe the day I planted tomatoes and brought the extra to the community center. Or maybe when Alex first came over months earlier and set his phone face down in a neat square on the table like he was choosing that moment more than anything else. Coffee, I said, because sometimes naming the small things makes the big ones sit in the other room and be quiet. Towels in the hallway. Do you need a dry shirt? His mouth tried for a smile and nearly got there. I'll steal one of yours, he said. Add it to my long list of crimes. We'll settle up, I told him. We always do. In the bathroom he moved like his shoulder hurt. He'd never admit it. He had that old habit of acting fine until his body negotiated otherwise. I went to the front window and lifted the blind with 2 fingers. The man under the tree hadn't moved. He looked like he belonged to the rain, like maybe he'd been assigned to it and never got reassigned. The first time I saw Alex, he didn't look like trouble. He looked like a headline in a suit, Sleek, sure, with a jawline like the past didn't dare speak its mind around him. He came to the Riverbend Community Center's pancake breakfast because someone whispered that a donation had to be won in person. I saw him through the heat lines coming off griddles. He was a real man, not a myth, and he was here to watch other people pour syrup on paper plates. That told me something I couldn't quite say out loud. I was wearing the volunteer apron, the one that still had my name, Dave, written across it in block letters from when I'd first signed up after my mother's fall. The thing about getting older is you learn how useful you are. Strong hands to steady a walker, a quick eye to spot the first steps of a scam to stop it, a knack for listening longer than someone expects. I use that every day in my work as a home physical therapist. I was using it that morning too, when Alex stood near the coffee urn and hovered like a man who needed a script for how to ask for help. I stepped beside him and filled 2 cups. "Black?" I asked. "Please," he said, and his voice was lower than I expected, as if he saved it for telling secrets and good news. I lifted my chin at the corner table. "We save that spot for folks who don't know where to sit." He smiled, a little crooked. "Am I obvious?" "Only to an expert," I told him, and he followed me. We talked about pancakes because talking about pancakes is safe. He asked about the center, about the hospice quilts on the wall, about the photos of teenagers from our summer program who learned to fix small engines and ended up teaching the rest of us about what resilience looks like when it smiles for a picture. He asked me my name and said his like he wasn't sure if he should. "Alex," he said, and he watched me so carefully to see what I'd do with it that I pretended not to know it. "I'm Dave," I said. "Thanks for coming down to our little breakfast." He glanced around the room, where Mrs. Brown waved and another volunteer tried not to burn bacon. He breathed out like he'd been holding himself tight for a month. "I heard if I showed up I'd be a person, not a rumor. And how's that going?" He met my eyes. Better by the minute. I didn't stop him from paying for everyone's pancakes. I watched him try to do it quietly and saw it turn into a small, gracious scandal. I watched him listen to a veteran talk about the Dixon Mill and what it meant when the doors closed last year. Alex didn't make a speech. He didn't promise a single thing. He asked questions like a man who had forgotten that asking questions is allowed. After, he walked me out to the parking lot. And the spring air tried to be warm while the wind remembered winter. "What do you really do?" I asked. "For work." Beyond the headline, he looked out at the river, grey and stubborn. "I build things," he said, and then he stopped himself because he knew what would come next. "I also break them, if I'm being fair. I buy companies and pull them apart until they make sense, or until there's nothing left that does." "Sounds lonely," I said. "It is," he said simply. He looked at me again. "Can I ask what you do when you're not saving strangers from bad coffee?" "Home health," I said. "I help people find their way back to themselves after they've fallen or lost something they didn't know how to live without." "How do you do that?" "I show up," I said. "And I stay." He nodded like I'd told him a thing he wanted very much to believe and had not yet seen in practice. "I like that," he said. He paused, like something inside him had turned a corner. "Can I see you again?" It was the softest question. We were 2 men in a parking lot, wind shivering the flags on the center's poles, and maybe anyone watching would have said we were just being polite. We were more than that. We both knew. I thought about life, about how love at our age is less a bolt from the blue and more a steady hand extended across a table at the right time. "Yes," I said. "I'd like that. Our first date wasn't a date." He asked if I liked baseball, and I said I liked the sound of it on the radio when I cooked. He brought tickets to a minor league game across the river, and we sat in seats that were a little too good for men like us. And I ate a hot dog with mustard, like I was proof of America. And he tried to relax into laughter, but kept scanning the exits. Then a boy a few rows down spilled his soda and started to cry, frustrated with himself and the stickiness all at once, and Alex stood up without thinking. He bought 3 napkins and an extra soda and a soft pretzel and came back like Santa in a suit. The boy's mother teared up and said they didn't need all that, and Alex looked like a man learning to apologize in a language he hadn't spoken in years. He said, "Maybe I do," and sat, and after that he watched the game. He really watched it. He asked me to explain a double play in a voice like he might be able to sleep that night. On a different day, he came to a house call with me. I asked my client first. It was her decision, and she was a widow with a quilt of grandkids who thought the world divided neatly between good men and bad ones. She said yes because she trusted my eyes. Alex carried in a bag of groceries. He stood in doorways and asked permission with his hands. When Mrs. Ramirez wanted to sit and talk more than she wanted to do her exercises, he made sure the tea didn't oversteep. He asked questions about her years at the plant, her favorite salsa, the best way to cut an onion with arthritic thumbs. He did not offer solutions. He offered presence. You could see the corners of him soften. The first time he came to my house, he asked to take his shoes off. I nodded because in my family that's respect. My father used to say that a home is how someone tells the world about their inside voice. I wanted the inside of me to be clean enough for Alex to sit in. We ate soup at my kitchen table. We listened to the neighbor kids play basketball in the alley, the squeak of their sneakers like a choir. He stood to wash the bowls, and I said, "I'll do it," and he said, "Let me," and I did. He told me a little about growing up. Not much. He painted it with broad strokes like it was a landscape he wasn't sure he could let anyone stand in yet. A mother who did her best more than once. Apartments where the heat banged in the pipes and the cabinets creaked. A kid who realized he understood numbers like other kids understood music. He said change was the only thing he could control, so he made a lot of it. He said he used to tell himself that if he could just get to the top of a building and look out at the night, the world would look back and nod. But when he got there, the nights were the same and the city didn't wave. He thought if he kept going, he might find a different rooftop. It took longer than he wanted to know that the answer lived down here with the rest of us, where kitchens smell like lemon soap and someone says your name like they mean it. He was still the bad millionaire in the paper. Headlines are sticky. The old Dixon mill became a running argument at our diner. He said he bought it because he thought he could turn it into something that made sense. He thought maybe the town would see him for what he meant, not who he'd been told to be. But he wasn't the only one with plans. Someone in his company had other ideas. That was when the emails started and the looks too. Men in cars you didn't recognize parked 2 blocks away. A courier who didn't knock just left a thick envelope under my doormat with no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper with the question, "What did he tell you?" You can tell yourself anything you like about being brave. It's the small things that scare you most. The way your name looks in strangers' hands. The way your habits are a map anyone can read if they try. I told Alex about the envelope over tea at the library, because there are some conversations that feel safer where there are stories on the shelves. He closed his eyes, and when he opened them they looked older than he'd like. "I'm sorry," he said. I said I'd keep you away from the sharp edges. "You did," I said, "because promises made by scared people don't count as contracts. And I think maybe those edges were implanted a long time ago. In both of us." He leaned forward. "Dave," he said quietly, and it sounded like an oath, "there's something you don't know. There's money tied up in the mill that shouldn't be there, not mine. I thought it was a mistake at first, then I thought it was clever, then I realized what it was. Someone is using the mill to wash what they can't clean in daylight. I have proof." "Who?" He named a man I'd heard at barbershops and city council meetings and backyard barbecues. Victor Logan, the kind of man who could smile and shake your hand and make you wonder later if you still had all your fingers. He had been Alex's mentor once, then his partner, then the kind of shadow that likes your company more than you like its. "You're going to go to the authorities," I said, because that was the kind of simple we were raised on. You learn the rules as kids, and you hope they don't change too much while you're trying to live by them. "I am," he said, "but I need to do it right. If I walk in with a stack of papers, they'll say I'm trying to save myself, which in part I am. I need a witness, someone who knows both sides of me, someone they can't dismiss. And you thought of me. I did, he said, and I heard both apology and hope. I put my hand flat on the table. He placed his over mine, careful as a man touching a newborn bird. The librarian pushed a cart past us and smiled like you do when you see something that makes you think of a better day. If love has a shape, sometimes it looks like two hands trying to find the right place to rest. From then, we lived in two lanes. By day, we were patient with soup and laundry, and holding Mrs. Ramirez's elbow, hacking down weeds in my backyard, talking about where to put the tomatoes. We were the kind of ordinary that makes a community work. By night, we were careful. We checked mirrors. We didn't take the same route twice. Alex changed phones and then changed them again. He collected papers that smelled like toner and Risk. He met with a lawyer who wore shoes that squeaked and eyes that didn't. He told me he had a flash drive with everything we needed. He kept it in an envelope inside an old hardcover book in his study, the kind you get at a yard sale for $0.25 because no one wants history until they're missing it. A week before the storm, someone broke into Alex's house. Nothing missing. Everything moved. That kind of hurt is hard to explain to anyone who hasn't felt it. They left the drawer open where the old book had been. They didn't take it, but they wanted him to know they could. Alex looked at me with that calm you put on when fire trucks show up next door. "Stay with me," he said. We spent 3 nights at my house, 2 at his. We went to the grocery store in the next town, because sometimes feeling safe means not building new habits for strangers to track. For dinner, I made roast chicken. He said it tasted like Thanksgiving and told me about the first time he saw the ocean, which had not been until his 3rd year out of college. Because blue was a color his childhood couldn't afford, I told him about my parents. My mother, who called me Buddy, even when she remembered my name fine. My father, who taught me how to clean a fish on the dock and how to apologize right the first time, because the second one never feels real. They're both gone now, but sometimes when the breeze comes off the river, I swear I hear my father's whistle and see my mother's sweater slung over the back of a chair. "You make this place feel like it wants me," he said one night, standing in my yard under a sky so full of stars it looked almost busy. I haven't known that feeling very often. "It's just a house," I said, but I knew better. It was a promise I was trying to live up to. The night of the storm, I set the coffee down between us, and Alex wrapped his hands around the mug like it was a fireplace. His hair dripped a polite puddle onto my floorboards that I'd sanded. Myself the summer after the hurricane. Took our power for a week, and I needed a project to keep myself from thinking about a future that had more space and less noise than I'd planned. "Tell me who's outside," I said. He didn't turn toward the window. He'd learned not to give watchers the dignity of acknowledgement. 2 men, one at the corner, one across the street. They might be waiting for me to come back out. Might want to see who I came to. And the proof? He reached into his bag and pulled out a Ziploc that was the opposite of romantic. Inside was a flash drive and what looked like 3 receipts and a photograph from the Mills offices. "This, plus a list of wire transfers and a good accountant with a spine," he said. "We meet the U.S. attorney tomorrow morning." Private entrance. "We don't take the car we came in. He met my eyes. I told them I'd bring a witness. I want that witness to be the only person who's seen me with a soup ladle in his hands." I felt my heart beat everywhere. It's a curious thing to be afraid and thrilled at once. It's like the first leap off the diving board every summer, when the water looks colder than you want, and you jump anyway, because it's how you remember you're alive. "Okay," I said. "We'll get some sleep. Then we'll drive." We didn't sleep much. The storm wouldn't hush. Every gust sounded like a new decision. Around 2, the power flickered and went. The house sighed into quiet, and the rain took up the job of being loud. Alex stood and lit a candle. We sat on the floor like kids in a fort. "Tell me something true," he said, "because when the night is too much, truth is the cheapest light you can make. I used to listen to old love songs on the AM station when I drove between clients," I said. "Not because the lyrics are great, because the voices told me we've been trying to get this right forever." He nodded, slow. "What about you?" I asked. "I'm not a good man," he said. I opened my mouth, but he put a hand up. I said true, and I meant it. I'm not a good man in the way that word gets used in polite company. I've cut corners. I've broken things I could have been gentler with. I thought winning would save me, and I have been mean sometimes to the idea that it wouldn't. But I want to be better than that. And when I am with you, I think I can be. It wasn't an apology, and it wasn't a sales pitch. It was a confession the night took like it was built for it. My father used to say that most of us grow up to be some kind of average between our worst moment and our best. What he didn't say was that love can nudge that line toward the light. You are plenty of things, I said. Some of them are sharp, but I know what kindness feels like. You have it. He reached over, his fingers finding mine in the dark, and the whole silly, dangerous world went quiet for a breath. We slept eventually. Two men on a living room rug with rain putting on a show outside. Morning came grey and stubborn. The power blinked back like it had reconsidered. The coffee was cold, but we drank it anyway. I left Annabelle with our neighbor, Mrs. Brown, who patted my shoulder and told me to bring back the good one. I asked which one that was. She said both and shut her door. We drove in my pickup. It's a quiet truck, the kind that blends into 100 others. We didn't use the interstate. We took the roads that locals take when they don't need to see billboards. We passed fields that waited for spring, barns that leaned like they'd listened to too many stories, kids throwing a basketball in a driveway with one mitten on and one off. I kept my eye on the mirror without letting the mirror know it. At a certain point on County Road 12, a black sedan pulled in behind us. Maybe it had been behind us for 3 miles. Maybe 30. I felt Alex stiffen the way a drawn bow does. You okay? I asked. He nodded once. Keep going. We did. We reached the city and became small. That's a comfort you forget you might need. To be small, to be one of many, to be lost in the way a crowd can save you. We parked in a garage I'd used during ball games. We walked 2 blocks, turned, cut through a hotel lobby, and ended up at a service entrance that belonged to the Federal Building, where a woman with the kind of eyes that had seen enough welcomed us with a nod. Mr. Vance, she said to Alex. Mr. Harmon, she said to me. It's always a surprise to hear your name from a stranger's mouth. Let's talk. In the conference room, Alex set the envelope on the table like a man placing his last coin. The U.S. attorney was younger than I expected, older than me, and he wore a tie that didn't make a point. He asked questions in a tone that sounded like he'd been taught not to promise anything except the process. He listened. He asked me how I knew Alex. I told him about pancakes, which made him smile, and about Mrs. Ramirez, which made him nod. He asked if I had any reason to lie. No, he asked if I had any reason to embellish. Only my tendency to make soup sound nobler than it is, Alex talked. He talked for 2 hours, and when he was done, he looked exhausted in a way I had not seen before. The kind of exhausted you get when you decide to be different mid-story. The kind that costs. When we left, the sky was clearing. The storm had washed the city until the sidewalks felt like new ideas. I wanted to think that was a sign. I wanted to trust the time it takes for the truth to wake up enough to work. We weren't home 10 minutes before my phone rang. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again. I took a breath and answered. You think you can walk into my house and burn it down? The voice had a smile tucked into it, the kind of smile that means the opposite of pleasant. You must be the nurse. Or are you the other thing? Who is this? My voice sounded like me on a less patient day. You know who this is, he said. Tell Alex his story got out of bed a little too late. The world has already had its coffee. He hung up before I could reply. I looked at Alex. He held out a hand for the phone like it was delicate. He listened to the voicemail when it arrived a second later with a text. See you soon. He didn't say a word. He deleted it. Then he turned the phone off and set it face down like it had earned a nap. We did the right thing, I said, more to the room than to him. We did, he said. He closed his eyes for a second. That doesn't mean it will be the easy thing. Nothing worth carrying is, I said, and I sounded like my father and my own better self, and both voices made me stand a little taller. We went on. You have to, even when it feels like the story is happening above your head and you're just listening to the floorboards creak. Days passed, we cooked. We took the truck to the river and let Annabelle trot along the path, her ears flopping like flags. We planted those tomatoes. Mrs. Ramirez finished the scarf she'd been knitting and insisted on paying me for the yarn, the way some people insist on not letting you love them for free. At night, sometimes I felt the house breathe, and sometimes I felt it hold its breath. Men sat in cars and practiced being forgettable. We made lists, who to call, what to do if one of us didn't come home on time. We told the small truth about big fear, that it grows best in the dark and shrinks if you make room for it at the table and feed it facts. There was a hearing set, public. That's how these things happen in a country that's trying. We would go. Alex would testify. We bought new suits because we wanted to look like the kind of men who trusted themselves. On the morning of the hearing, the air felt like it had been sanded smooth. We walked into the courthouse hand in hand until the door required we separate. It was not a romantic moment, and yet it was one of the most romantic of my life. To walk with someone into a room where truth is supposed to be welcome, it's a vow, old and new. We sat. The room smelled like paper and polished wood. 100 people waited for the story that had been written in whispers. The judge stepped in. Lawyers shuffled. Reporters uncapped pens. Victor Logan sat across from us, his tie a small defiance, his eyes a pair of polite windows with the curtains closed. Alex stood when he was called. He said his name. He said the name of the mill and the names of the people who had been clever in ways the law did not treat as compliments. He did not make himself the hero. He said he had been slow to act. He said that sometimes the person in the best position to fix a thing is the last one to believe they should. He said my name once when asked how he had decided to come forward. He said it like he was giving thanks for a meal that kept him alive. Victor's lawyer was a sharp instrument. He asked questions designed to make Alex bleed. Alex didn't help him, he answered cleanly. He didn't let sarcasm show up, even though I saw it at the door, eager to be used. He was not the bad millionaire in that chair. He was the man I'd met over pancakes. When it was done, we walked outside into a day that had decided it would be bright no matter what. The reporters tried. They always will. We moved through them like water. A woman from the diner stood past the steps and held a paper bag. For after, she said. You look like you could use a sandwich. We could, I said. Good, she said. Then softer. Proud of you. She looked at both of us, and I felt something shift in the air. You don't know which small moments change a place until you look back and realize the ground isn't where you left it. It took months. That's the part most stories leave out. It took long, slow days, and the machine of the law moved like it was cautious because it didn't want to cut its own hands. Victor made speeches about misunderstanding. He tried to buy the time he could not rent. He failed at last, because a pattern of ledger lines and wiring diagrams and one photograph taken in an office with bad lighting is still a story if someone cares enough to read it out loud. Alex was not charged. That too took time. We went to the river on the day the letter arrived. We didn't shout or dance. We sat on the bench where couples bring their early dinner and watched the water shoulder past the rocks like it had appointments it meant to keep. He leaned his head on my shoulder. We did not talk. If silence had a color that day, it was gold, thin and kind. The paper ran a headline that tried for fairness and hit almost instead. That's fine. Headlines are for bending. People, if you offer them patience, tend to bend toward their better shape eventually. That summer, we turned the old Dixon mill into something else. It wasn't ours, not all of it, not legally or even morally. It belonged to the people who had poured in and out of its doors with lunch pails and jokes. But we helped. We did what we could. Alex said he wanted to put money into a place that could use it without as much suffering. He set up a fund to help small businesses build in the space. Repair shops, a textile studio, a kitchen that taught teenagers to feed themselves and, by extension, the rest of us. People asked if I worked for him now. I said no, because love isn't a job and I already had one. I kept doing what I did, stepping into homes that smelled like old coffee and eucalyptus rub, helping folks stand tall again. Sometimes Alex came with me when he had a free hour. He learned to wrap a knee without causing pain. He learned the art of closing a curtain so the light gets in without blinding the person who needs it most. He found out he liked a good pair of work gloves. We had fights. Of course we did. He worked too much, or he didn't tell me a worry until it was a hurricane, or I folded into myself and made him knock 2 extra times. We apologized, properly. That's one of those simple sentences that holds a whole life's work. He learned that when I say I need 5 minutes, I mean the kind you measure on a clock, not the kind where you wait for me to be someone else. I learned that when he says he's scared, it means he's standing on a ledge where he can see every version of himself, and he needs me to pick which one comes home. On a Sunday in October, when the maples made a fair argument for the bright side, we drove out to the lake where my father used to keep his fishing boat. The boathouse still stood, a stubborn rectangle with peeling paint, the smell of old grass and engine oil heavy as a blanket. We sat on the edge and let our feet touch the cold water. Alex held a small box in his hand. He didn't make a speech. I used to think a ring meant ownership, he said. Then I thought it meant apology. Now I think it means a place to rest your promise so it doesn't roll away when you need both hands. He opened the box. The ring was plain and strong. It looked like it knew how to hold up its end. I'm not asking to be perfect with you, Dave, he said. I'm asking to be brave. I'm asking to buy a truck that isn't anonymous and pick out curtains and keep showing up on your porch with stories I'm not sure how to tell yet. I'm asking to be the man you make me think I can be when we're cooking and the radio plays old voices. Will you? He paused, and in the quiet the small waves lapped like they knew their part. Will you stay with me? I laughed then, because he said it the way the weather says it will be hot and mean it. I will, I said. On one condition. He raised an eyebrow, playing along. Name it. You tell your board we're bringing back pancake breakfasts in the mill. And you flip the pancakes. He laughed properly. The good laugh, the one that loosened his shoulders. Deal, he said, and he slid the ring onto my finger like it had been there, invisible all along. We didn't make a big announcement. We told Mrs. Brown, who said, "It's about time," and baked us a pie that could have healed international disagreements. We told Mrs. Ramirez, who cried and said she would outlive us both just to make sure we behaved. We told the teenagers at the kitchen, who made a banner out of butcher paper and spelled both our names wrong, and then crossed out the mistakes and drew a heart around the mess and called it art. We had a party at the mill, the kind where the food mattered more than the speeches. People brought casseroles that came from recipe cards stained with butter and grief. Alex stood up and said thank you in 20 different ways. He said sorry in 3. He did not defend himself against who he'd been. He promised to keep earning the chance to be better. Sometimes that's the only speech that matters. I wish I could tell you that the men under the tree never came back. They did a few times, and then they stopped, maybe because they got bored, or because the story they were writing got cancelled, or because the world turned the page. I wish I could tell you the label fell off Alex, like a sticker under hot water. It didn't, it frayed at the edges. People warmed to him or didn't, and both were about themselves as much as him. We lived anyway. There is a moment, nearly every night, when the radio plays a song from 50 years ago, and the kitchen light is soft, and the tomatoes sit on the windowsill like they've decided to stay red forever. I look across at him, tie loosened, sleeves rolled, a nick on his thumb from chopping onions too fast, and I see the man I met at a pancake breakfast. I see the man who stood in a courtroom and told the truth even when it was heavy. I see the boy who learned to protect himself with money and mail, and who learned, later than he wanted, that protection is no match for presence. He looks at me and sometimes he says, "Remember the rain?" And I say, "I remember the coffee." And we both laugh because love is a house with many rooms, and we've agreed which ones we like best. We still get nervous. We still make sure doors are locked and calendars are precise. But we also leave our shoes by the door. We also make a second cup in the morning because the first one tastes better when it's shared. On days when the country feels big and loud and full of trouble, we go to the river and count the geese and wave at the man who sells bait. And we come home to a house that knows our inside voices and holds them, steady and warm. A year after the hearing, the mill hosted a winter market. It was cold enough to make cheeks pink. Inside, strings of lights made the whole place feel like a story you tell on purpose. Children ran, parents negotiated, teenagers pretended not to be sweet. Alex and I stood at the pancake griddle. I poured, he flipped. We moved like we'd practiced, we had. He looked up and caught my eye, and something like that first morning in the parking lot moved through me. "You're doing great," I said. "Thanks," he said. He grinned and missed a flip and laughed at himself and tried again. And he nailed it. The pancake landed on the griddle with a soft kiss of batter and promise. A cheer went up from the kids watching, which is how you know the world approves. Later, when the last napkin was thrown away and the last cord was rolled, and we stood in the doorway of the mill that had become something like a neighborhood living room, I felt the cold bite my ears and I leaned into him. He leaned into me. I thought of all the rooms we'd entered together, courtrooms and living rooms, and the small, brave ones inside ourselves, where we decide who we are and what we mean to do with the days we have left. "You know," I said, "I used to think the world looked best from the top of a building." He squeezed my hand. "And now?" "Now I think it looks best from here," I said, "where the floor's a little sticky and everybody's trying, and the pancakes aren't perfectly round, but they taste like home." He turned, his forehead to mine. Around us, the last of the market's laughter blew away down the street like confetti the wind hadn't finished with. "I love you," he said. I said it back. It felt like lighting a candle. It felt like turning on the porch light and knowing that someone on the road can see where to go. It felt like making coffee in a storm and listening for the knock you know by heart. It felt like being brave and being kind at the same time, which is the closest I know to getting life right. We went home. We turned the key the way you do when you love what waits on the other side. We made tea. We read a little. We put our feet on the coffee table like two men who had nothing to prove to the night. And when the radio played an old song and the chorus came around, we sang it softly and badly, together, which is the only way some songs should be sung.